Namaste everyone, hello and welcome to another episode of Musings of a Modern Mystic with me, Amy Yasmin. So I invite you to settle in wherever you are, however I find you, taking that shared breath as we land in this space together. As we're ready to delve into another theme today. And this one that's been playing out for me quite recently is this notion of the saviour, the fixer. So this is quite a playful one. So this is inspired actually by, for as long as I can remember from childhood, I've been a deeply, deeply empathetic young being. I was always a very sensitive soul. And I'd always notice if anyone was off, if anyone needed a hug, if anyone was being left out. I was very much drawn to include people, to befriend those that might not have friends, to cheer someone up if they look sad, if they're crying, if they're hurt, to be there to help them. And this has been, ever since then, ever since a very young age, this natural inclination has been discernible right the way through my life, whether in work environments, whether in my friendships, the neighbours, anything like that. I've always had this desire to help other people, and it's only as I'm growing up and maturing that I'm starting to realise that as beautiful as that quality and essence and desire can be seen, I was also porous in it. So this notion came up for me of the porous empath, right? So I was like a sponge. I would see someone upset and I, like a sponge, would go over there and I would try and take in their sadness. I'd try and fix it, change it, try and cheer them up, make them laugh, make it go away. I didn't like seeing people upset, hurt. I would do anything I could to fix them. To fix that situation for them, to see them in a better place, a happier place. And I found particularly, I don't know about anyone else, but when it comes to close family, close friends, it can be even harder to step back. It could be even harder it would hurt all the more. I would hurt if they hurt. I felt a deep sense of helplessness and despair when I'd see loved ones going through challenges, struggles in their lives, in various points of my life, different relatives, different friends. And it's only as I'm getting older, as I'm maturing and reflecting in new ways, that I'm realising that I've lost myself many times and devoted all of my energy pretty much exclusively to the outside world and to other people. And I wouldn't really give any thought to that yes, if someone came and said, can you help me with this? It wasn't even a question in me. It was a, how am I going to make this happen? So I never looked at balancing the books, if you like. If I saw, just thinking at this from a different perspective, if I was an accountant and they said to me, right, within today you've got X amount of hours, X amount of money, however you want to perceive it, if you looked at it numerically and you say you've got this amount of energy today, how are you going to divide that? I'd never even think any of that. It was just a case of meeting whatever need came up in that moment. And as beautiful and genuine as that could be, the result of that from a very early working life, from a very early adolescence, teenage years, often that translated in me giving all of my energy to other people and having little to no time to myself. And any form of self-relaxation, enjoyment, it got lost for many reasons, whether the busyness, social media, all these different kinds of distractions. But an aspect of it was this notion of trying to be a helpful person, a kind person to help other people. And I don't know about anyone else, but I used to feel this deep sense of guilt, of regret, of shame even, if I was unable to help someone, especially if it was someone that I loved or cared for. Saying no really wasn't any part of my life, I really, really struggled to say no. I actually didn't realise this until I was at the Rainbow Gathering in New Zealand. And it was this incredible experience where we had workshops and someone would just shout out whatever they'd kind of felt inspired by, something they wanted to share. And someone shouted out, workshop, consent, boundaries. And I was like, oh, this will be really interesting for me to hear for the young people that I work with, for the youth work. So I went along, and it was, at its core, a lot of it was around, can you say no? Can you say yes with a holy hell yes, holy heck yes, like a full-hearted, open-hearted yes, and to say no to the things that meant you had the energy and the desire to say that yes when that yes felt right. So one of the first exercises as you're in small groups and you're getting to know each other a little bit was, right, I just want you to stand up. You might feel daft saying this, you might feel daft doing this, but I want you to stand up. And the other person's going to ask you a question. And all you're going to do is say no. So they're going to ask you to do something and you're just going to say no. And he said, and say no like you mean it. And my no was comical. So it came to me and I'm like, yeah, of course I can say no. You know, like, what of it? And so they were like, oh, can you, I can't even remember what question they asked me. And I was like, no. And in that moment, I realised how uncomfortable I was just saying no. And it was a bodily feeling. It was a me curling in on my stomach, my shoulders are rounded. I'm making myself as small as possible. My voice is getting quieter and quieter. I really didn't want to say it. And he said, right, okay, everyone, I just want you to notice your body language, your tone of voice, your posture, how you're feeling. Because people receive this message. You know, we speak in so many languages in life. We speak through our words, but in learning around special needs and autism, I learned that a lot of communication, I think about 90 to 95% of communication was around the level of tone of voice and body language, and things that some people that are neurodiverse might find a little bit more challenging to read, to be aware of, to interpret and navigate. And that really got me thinking, oh my goodness, yeah, okay, I might be saying no, but what is the rest of me saying? Because the rest of me is saying, I really don't want to say this, I really want to say yes. So we did a few practices, a few exercises, standing there shouting, saying no, putting your hand up, saying no, just feeling how it feels in different postures. And then he was like, right, at the end he's like, I'm going to ask you a question again, and I want you to say that no like you mean it, with conviction, with passion, with every sense of meaning that no. And it got to me and he says, Amy, they need some help in the kitchen, can you just go help out? Now, I'd spent every day in the kitchen helping out because I thought that was a helpful thing to do. I also wanted to eat that day, and I felt like everyone could contribute in a community. That's what you did. So every day without fail I'd be there, and sometimes I was actually resentful of that because I was always doing it. I was never saying no. So he turns around, Amy, can you just go help out in the kitchen? And the way he said it, it made it sound like we're not even in the workshop anymore. Like, genuinely, someone's just come up and asked, can you go and help in the kitchen? And I just flatlined. I was like, no. I struggled to even say the word. Because I genuinely didn't want to say no. I wanted to go and help. That part of me that has the compassion and the caring didn't even entertain the notion of a no. And it took a while to realise that resentment is actually a messenger for me to remind me, wait a minute, how much of myself, how much of my discernment energy is going into me? How much self-care time have I got? Have I rested? Have I paused? How much of my own needs am I meeting before I'm saying this yes? Because resentment's often a sign I'm overextending. And so that was a massive learning curve for me. And even since then, saying no, it's getting easier at times. It can still be challenging. I'm much more conscious around it. And when people ask me something, my first response now is, can I get back to you? I afford and create for myself, I ask for myself the time that I need to properly take into account what I'm committing to. to properly feel into that. Is this right for me now? Can I truly give my fullest to this now? Because if I give 50% to everyone, no one's getting my best. It's like making a cup of tea and then giving that to so many people and diluting it with more milk and more water. They're getting a flavourless blur. They're not getting the full essence of me. And it really took time to learn and realise in the experience that played out after that, like my life experience, I've learned these things, and then life teaches me and shows me how I've been playing that out in a very visceral, very helpful way. And journaling is really helping me to stop and to notice these things. As is reflecting, as is writing the book about New Zealand and about all the experiences and integrating that coming back. So when I was reflecting back to the pre-travel years, I realised that a lot of the times I'd experienced burnout, it was because of my lack of boundaries, and it was because I was overextending. A lot of that was driven by my desire to help others. Now, I've grown up in a world where a virtue, I saw as a virtue, selflessness, of going the extra mile, of kindness, finding yourself in the service of others. I believed that to care about myself, to give time, put time and energy into myself, was selfish, was self-indulgent in a negative light. So, and I'd often say to people as well, it's amazing, the advice we give can often be the advice, in my experience, that I need to take. So I'd so often say to people, look after yourself, you can't pour from an empty cup, don't overdo it, sounds like you've got a lot on, all this kind of stuff. But I'd never stop and think that back about myself. It was easier to give the advice than it was to take it and live it. And these last few years for me have really been taking all of these lessons that I've learned through travel, through self-reflection, through journaling, and actually living it. They say children will hear what you say, but they'll do as you do. So words are only so much. If they hear you say, I love myself, and they see you criticising, for example, your appearance in the mirror or in a dress, or them comments, they're going to be reading and experiencing potentially the mixed signals. So it's like children, that I came across that quote, children will do as you do, be the example you want them to live out. And then it was like this light bulb moment of, oh wait, if I want to see a change in this world, I need to live it for me. I don't need to change anyone's mind. I don't need to convince anyone that this is the thing to learn and this is the way to go and this is how to go about it. It's to live my truth. It's to walk my walk. It's to do it for myself and see how that feels for me. And if people then ask me, how did you do that? Then sharing that. From that genuine, authentic, I'm just doing my thing. I'm in my lane. If people are interested, fine. And if they're not, fine. I'm not here to teach anything, I'm a storyteller. I'm here to share stories, to connect with people, to do what I love, and that's just one aspect of this, and that's how the podcast even got born. So coming back to this notion of the saviour and the fixer. So pre-travel, I was in jobs where, the retail job for example, I do overtime. Initially, part of it was fueled by the desire for extra income, but a lot of the time, especially later on, and I had other jobs and other commitments, I struggled to say no because we were a small team and I didn't want to let anyone down. I'd take one for the team. And I'd tell myself, I'm younger than them, I've got more energy than them, I'm stronger than them, all these things. I used to go to the gym, I had a highly active lifestyle. And compared to some of my other colleagues, I'd be like, it's not fair to expect them to have to do that. I don't want anyone else put out if I say no. So I wouldn't say no. And the result of that was the one year I remember vividly, it is Christmas Day? No, it's Boxing Day. It's Boxing Day. I've sat through Christmas Day. Don't know how much I've enjoyed Christmas Day, but it's been a day off. And Boxing Day, I'm sat in the shower and we're going to see my aunt, and I love my aunt to the bits, and I'm literally sat in the shower. I haven't got the energy to even shampoo, to nothing. I'm sat there. I'm praying for the energy to show up for my family. Because I would rather be in bed. I was absolutely floored. And the person that went into work at that time was literally just whoever was least ill, whoever could stand up, you know? And there were some days where I'd be sat on a stool in between serving customers. Never thinking, do you know what? If I look after myself, maybe in the longer term thing, you know, my mum used to say to me, if a bus hit you tomorrow, they'd have to cope. But in my mind, I was like, no, I'm letting people down. By placing the needs of others and the perceived needs of others and thinking about others before myself, I really wasn't looking after my physical body's needs, my mental and emotional needs, especially when it came to the special needs work that I was doing that could be so fulfilling and yet so challenging at times. And I do not regret it for a minute. It offers some of the richest experiences I've ever had. I've connected with such beautiful people through this work. And there's a deep, deep passion and compassion and connection that I have with these young people that I feel is a real gift. That said, though, it could be very mentally and emotionally draining at times if I was supporting a young person with very complex needs, if I was doing one-to-one work, if they were presenting with quite challenging behaviours or they were having a challenging time themselves, and I'm trying to help them ride the waves through them challenging behaviours and the frustrations of not being able to express themselves verbally, communicate, whatever it may be. And I was so passionate about helping them young people that I wasn't recognising how much of an emotional toll sometimes that was taking. And I wasn't taking any time to actually reflect on how can I support myself in this? What support might I need in this? I wouldn't ask for help, and it got to the point where, yeah, like I've discussed in a former podcast, I'd hide in a toilet. Rather than asking for help, rather than saying I'm finding this quite challenging, I would just hide in a toilet until the minute work started so that no one would ask, so that I wouldn't get emotional, so that they wouldn't see how much I was finding it hard to even meet them in the eye. And so I transitioned from this to travelling. I'm thinking, do you know what? I've left all of this behind. I've got on a plane, like it's a fresh horizon. I felt like a weight had been lifted as I flew. And landing in New Zealand, it felt like a completely clean slate, a completely different place. And then I started working, within a couple of weeks, managed to get some seasonal work on a vineyard. And I didn't realise that I couldn't outrun the past. It had followed me. I didn't see it for what it was. I was working with some guys, predominantly the team that I was allocated with on the vineyards were these guys from Vanuatu, which is 80 Pacific Islands. And the more I learned about their culture and what brought them across, I realised that their standard of living was very different from the UK. I realised that for a lot of them, potentially that was the main way to make income, potentially for their families, for their communities. And it was extremely challenging work. I found it quite challenging and increasingly soul affecting. So doing the same work day in, day out, it was hot New Zealand summer. There's challenges. I'm running around in wellies because some of the yards are so boggy. My walking boots are tattered in no time. So there's, blisters and rubbing, and it's hot and it's pretty unforgiving, those conditions, and doing the same very intense physical work and running at pace because there's a quota system. You're on a probationary period as European seasonal workers. We were, which meant that they'd supplement to a degree. And so I was working to meet that quota. And especially the days where I saw everyone's flagging, where I saw even the Vanuatu guys who'd, they'd have banter, high fives, they'd race each other, they'd laugh. When I saw that spirit declining, the songs would quiet, when everyone's trudging a bit more, the footsteps are a bit heavier, the pace is a bit slower, I'd push on because I'd want to take one for the team. I'd want to lighten their load. And we were in it together. If we were going to go home, you had to finish the rows on the yard. So I wasn't realising that a factor playing into me reaching yet another state of losing myself to work was that desire to help others, to be a good team member, as I'd perceived it. To be kind, to be helpful, to go above and beyond. And it got me thinking, where did that even come from? Is that something I was born with? Is it an ingrowing quality of me? Or to what degree have I learned that there's a certain way to act out, to behave, there's certain beliefs and values that I've come to place more highly than my own needs, than being aware of my body, of the bigger picture of the time and energy that I've got in a day, in a week. And how often as well I actually felt quite rubbish in myself when it was time to go and see family, like that Boxing Day in Wolverhampton, going and visiting my family, and not having the energy or the desire to actually be with them in that moment because I was so shattered, or to turn down social invites because I was too tired, it was too late, I had a shift the next day, whatever it may be. How much of what might have actually lit me up, what I might have enjoyed, what might have helped me rebalance, and how much I was saying no because I was prioritising other people and other needs. And when I got really down to the core of it, I realised, oh my goodness, no matter what I do, no matter where I go, I then tried a permaculture placement. And again, this sense of overextending played out again. Resentment reared its head again. Again, I was called to stop, to reflect, because my body turned around and said no. Insomnia started to call, the restlessness of the mind, exhaustion mentally, emotionally, because I was holding so much in, not listening to it, so it built up and built up. And it was just this sense, I realised at the core, that no matter what I do, no matter where I go, no matter how hard I try, what I do never seems to be enough. There always seems to be more need in this world, as I perceived it, than what I can meet. I realised that I was trying to solve the problems of the world, of everyone I encountered, myself. It's like I carried this weight on my shoulders. I took on the responsibility of everyone else because I cared so much about all these other people. This selfless desire, this selfless belief, that I'd completely lost touch with myself. And so I've started to revise my understanding and experience of self-care, of self-awareness, of self-love and compassion. I have poured love, time, energy into so many projects, charities, other people. You ask other people around me and they'll often say how kind, how thoughtful, how I've helped them potentially. And yet, as beautiful as them attributes and them, they've come from a genuine place. As beautiful as that is, I'm starting to think about myself and balancing the books. I'm starting to think, I want the world to receive me in my fullest, and therefore I have to protect that. I have to boundary that. I have to make sure that the books are balanced. There is time and energy within every day, and I ensure that there is time and space for doing nothing. There's a Buddhist saying, doing nothing, everything is done. Every day I make sure I've got time to just be. Whether that's meditating, whether that's sitting in the garden, whether that's having a brew, colouring, reading, even if it's 5 minutes. I make sure, I try, there's times I slip. Because, right, life, humanity, forgetfulness. And yet, when I take the time for me, I feel better in me, and I come to the world in that place. When I've slept well, I show up differently. When I tend to my mental well-being, when I listen when I'm feeling a bit more rocky, there's times I feel quite sensitive. There's times I feel to pull away from people a little bit, or to not message people on social media for a little while. And just noticing, wait a minute, I just need a little bit of me time. I just need a bit of time in nature, and listening to that. I'm feeling different in me, and resentment is not such a familiar companion, because I'm starting to listen and to learn that language. And women's circles, the theme of last week was the feminine. One of the massive learning curves for me in sitting in women's circles was being able to listen, to be present, to hold space for people I love without fixing, without jumping in with a piece of advice, with a desire to fix, with a desire to take their challenges and their worries away. As much as I may love them, as much as my heart may be feeling for them in that moment, it's getting easier to bear witness to the sorrow, to the pain, to the grief, to the challenge, frustrations, to all these attributes I hadn't wanted to acknowledge or feel in myself because I considered them negative. It's getting easier to hold space for that, for others and for myself. To be able to take the pains and the joys of the world, to hold it all. To see the world in all of its brokenness, and to also still simultaneously be able to appreciate a moment of beauty. Something that is very right with the world. I used to live in a very depressed state for quite some time, when I was completely focused on the news, the outside world, and what I perceived as wrong with the world. And that despair and that depression, that helplessness just pulled me down and down and down, because I didn't see what I could do. And now that I've turned that back, that gaze back to myself, to how am I feeling today? What does my body need today? How have I been emotionally? How am I showing up for other people? How do I feel in my day? How genuinely am I loving people? Am I connecting with people? Starting to listen to my own feelings, my own world, listen to my own dreams. In the daydreams as well as in the nighttime dreams. I'm starting to learn and realise that coming back to myself is a gift. And that I am enough, just as I am. I don't need to fix anything. I don't need to solve anything. I have got many attributes, aspects of my life and my journey that I'd like to see shift, transform, grow, what might have been once called healing. And instead, I can sit with that more easily. Still a challenge at times, but more easily and less restlessly. Acknowledging that this is just how it is now. And that's enough. That me breathing, that me waking, that me just being on the earth is enough. And it's a remarkably liberating thing to not feel like I've got a weight of responsibility for everyone else's problems and challenges, and that I don't have to fix it. I don't have to feel stuck in that despondency and depression of I don't have the answer. Of being able to just hold space and say, I can't change it. I can't make that grief go away, but I can listen. I can stand here with you. So here we are. Another circle and spiral walked. So I wonder what that's brought up for you. What are your experience of empathy, of helping others, especially for those that identify with more feminine traits, with that kind of caring and empathetic nature, which can be in men and women, but that more feminine quality and trait. If we look at feminine and masculine as embodying different energies and essences. How does that present and play out in your life? And how do you perceive self-care compared to the love you give to others? How do you consider the self-dialogue you have and what you might do for yourself compared to other people. If someone came to you sad, how would you respond to them? And then how do you hold yourself in sadness? So just be curious. So there we have it. Another episode. Thank you for joining me. Please do share any stories or experiences that resonate from this around this notion of helping others, fixing others, lack of boundaries, saying no. What does it bring up for you? And let's spark a new conversation, create a new story together. So thank you for joining me, and I will see you again next week, in a fortnight even, for another episode of Musings of a Modern Day Mystic. Until then, take care, and thank you for listening. Bye for now.